Hello.
Hello.
And good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And to you.
I am Hope Iglehart, the Director of Engagement and African American Heritage at Historic Athens. As we gear up for the spectacular 75th anniversary celebration of the Georgia Museum of Art's lecture park, I just wanted to share I had the privilege to speak with Bill Hall and before the celebration, and he is the long-standing supporter of the Georgia Museum of Arts. He held the distinction of being the first director of the Georgia Museum of Arts following the esteemed Mr. Holbrook. Bill shared a fascinating glimpse into history, talking about back in 1965 when he was appointed to the art department. And his journey culminated in 1967 when he became a curator at the Georgia Museum of Arts, kicking off his tenure with the groundbreaking visual assault exhibit. And this is Mr. Holbrook, who delving into the museum's genesis. Bill recounted the synergy between Mr. Holbrook and Ms. Millie Deering, who worked tirelessly as a dynamic duo to establish the museum within the walls of the old library building. And here is Bill and Mr. Holbrook. Under Bill's stewardship in 1967 marked a pivotal period of growth, and at that time they created a rotating board, expanded capacity, and the addition of influential individuals such as John Bullard and Nancy Lushevitz. The museum's family expanded further with names like Janice Stanley, the resourceful bookkeeper Vicki Brown, and the gifted curator Elmore Griffin. Bill's storytelling unearthed the continuous tussle of maintaining separate identities for the art department and the museum, highlighting the sheer dedication of Mr. Holbrook, who directed until the remarkable age of 99. That's wow. All I can say was wow on that. A pivotal moment that echoed through the nation was the 1970 exhibit featuring Philip Pearlstein, putting the Georgia Museum of Arts firmly on the map. And Bill's personal favorite, the 1975 Alice Neal exhibit, which sparked controversy due to its captivating controversy, even leading to a silent guest of honor at dinner. Bill's tales continued, unveiling stories like the 1976 Paul Bury exhibit and the audacious Michelangelo Pistoletto, excuse me. Who could forget the trash parade that shook City Hall, much to the bewilderment of the mayor, who questioned the cleanup logistics. And yes, Michelangelo's art would ultimately grace the prestigious halls of the Louvre. In 1971, the birth of the Friends Group, a vibrant community inspired by the Nelson University of Kansas model. And rock bands like REM, Pylon, and the B-52s, initially struggling artists, became cherished friends of the museum, shining a spotlight on the museum's electric spirit. So today we have with us an exciting guest speakers. We have Dr. John English, revered figure from the great College of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Georgia, who has left quite a mark as being a supporter and curator at the Georgia Museum of Art. After which we will have words from Dr. Paige Carmichael, a luminary from the College of Veterinary Medicine, celebrated for her support of the Friends of Georgia Museum of Art. And we will also have Ms. Jean Petrovs, a dedicated member since 1995, honored for the exceptional leadership and contribution to the museum's community and their docent program. Followed by the incomparable Lee Epting, a GMOA mainstay since the 70s. Lee's passion for hosting, nourishing everyone with food, and orchestrating spectacular events has made him an icon. Join us as we welcome them all as they take the stage.
I'm sorry. I'm fine.
At this time, we will have John English, who as a curator and the supporter of the Georgia Museum of Art.
Seeing those photographs from some 50 years ago kind of gives you they seem so current to me because I was there. It's, I think I joined the board in 1979. So, I guess I'm one of the old timers. 1970, when I joined the faculty at the School of Journalism, I inherited a course in the curriculum called book reviewing, which Mr. Drury, the dean, had been teaching for 30-some years. I thought it was a little bit narrow, so I decided to expand its scope to reviewing all of the arts. And I wanted students to witness cultural events, mainly on campus, because a lot of kids in those days didn't have cars, and then write about those experiences. Theater, dance, music, so on. Art, obviously, is one of those things. And that's how I got to know Bill Paul, who was director of the museum in its old North Campus location, which was far less than ideal, as most of you know. Bill and curator Ethel Moore, as Hope pointed out, were bringing major contemporary artists to campus for their exhibitions. And so I wanted journalism students to review these shows and to hear the artists talk about their work. And as she mentioned, Alice Neal, she met with students like a little old grandmother and just chatting away with students, and they loved it, and they learned a lot. And so she mentioned Philip Pearlstein, a great watercolorist who recently died, brought his work here, and I'd never seen watercolors like that. It was amazing stuff. And the stiletto, I guess you'd have to, became an artist in residence. He was here, supposed to be here for the show, but he ended up staying several months. And I'll never forget his work because he went to the thrift stores and bought a bunch of furniture and went out to the woods and cut down a bunch of trees, and then he mounted the furniture on the trees. And then put mirrors underneath the furniture so that you were walking around under the furniture looking up and seeing yourself. Really crazy, wonderful stuff, I thought. So I thought students really benefited from these shows and from the artists. So I was very grateful to Bill and Ethel for these opportunities for students. And oftentimes I would, once they did their reviews, I would share those with the museum staff so they could see what the feedback was from the students. I shared both their vision for the museum and I supported its mission. And as a result, I was invited to join the board. As you might guess, I was the youngest person on the board. I did accept, but I wasn't able to make financial contributions, which I think board members were expected to do. Nor was I at all interested in donning a tuxedo and going to a gala party. Not my thing. So I wanted to find some other ways to contribute. And at the time, my personal passion was film, and I was especially fascinated with the avant-garde films, the short films of artists that artists were making. In New York, they were called underground films when I was in graduate school there. But I also knew that the Ann Arbor Film Festival at the University of Michigan was a national showcase for these experimental films, and that their annual juried winners went on tour to other campuses. So I had the idea of bringing that Ann Arbor Film Festival to UGA, and I asked Bill Paul if the museum would sponsor it. He agreed. So it was on. These quirky short films were unspooled in a makeshift theater with folding chairs, very uncomfortable folding chairs, in the main gallery. Campus students and art students especially turned out, and it was I'd call it a big success, and we continued it for several years. The second form of contribution I made was as a facilitator for a major donation. A friend and co-conspirator, Dr. Tommy Mew, and when I say co-conspirator, we did some projects together and had great fun doing that. Did I just do something? Lost my place. Tommy Mew was also both an artist, a very accomplished artist, but he was also a department head at Berry College in Rome. You want to go back to that? Sorry about that. So, Tommy Mew. You know, we talked fairly often, and he told me that a New York artist named Les Levine and a group of contemporary artists in New York and California were looking for a way to honor the newly elected President Jimmy Carter in his home state. So I suggested the Georgia Museum of Art. And Tommy said, okay, I'll ask Les. And I said, okay, I'll ask Bill Paul. And both were interested in such a donation. So Bill and Ethel flew to New York to discuss this idea with Levine and one of his colleagues, a guy named, artist named Dennis Oppenheim. They went to see the collection. There were 31 works in all, in a variety of media: film, video, photographs, sound tapes, and some other forms. They were duly impressed and expanded the idea to invite all 29 artists of the 31 works to come to Athens for the opening and for what they called a convention. to talk about issues in the art world. Paul wrote Carter to see what his reaction might be to this offbeat art collection, and Carter replied he'd be honored by this type of recognition. I suspect he didn't know anything about it, but that's okay. Paul got the university's Board of Regents to accept this gift. I don't know if he went through channels or not, but it doesn't matter. They accepted it, and at that time, it was valued at roughly $100,000. Levine described the mission of the collection. This is what he wrote. I'll read it to you. To us, Carter represents hope. A man from Plains wants to put America back to feeling good about itself and people back to feeling good about one another. In donating these works, the artists are taking a new position. We are standing forth as a group to make a public declaration. We are saying, let's all be open to the possibility of hope. The kind of art we make is open to new ideas. Throughout the campaign and since his election, President-elect Carter has conveyed to us a similar openness to new ideas. To this, we are responding with our hopes and with our tangible gifts to his native state of Georgia. So obviously the title of the collection became Open to New Ideas, New Art for Jimmy Carter. Now, they wanted to do the show before the inauguration, and of course, as you know, the election was in November, and they already had the schedule for the museum was already laid out for several years in advance. So that all got kind of thrown aside, and the museum took on the task of putting together this impromptu show. I set out to try to document it. I raised funds to produce a half-hour television documentary for Georgia Public Television. I got a bunch of colleagues, because I didn't have much money, I got a bunch of colleagues to help both film and edit the program, and it was later shown on Channel 8 around the state. CBS News got word of this, and they flew a film crew to Athens to cover the convention. And they ran a 5-minute segment aired on the network. And a full transcript of the artist's discussion on the changing role of the artist in today's society, working problems that artists face, and a long agenda of other concerns was published in the exhibition catalog. And I have retained a copy of that catalog, and if you want to know about the work is all depicted here with little profiles of the artist, and then the transcript of that convention. Now, as you might guess, this art was not universally admired. Some objected to the association with Jimmy Carter, either because the works defamed his name or vice versa. Others thought they were being conned by some wily New Yorkers, and it wasn't art at all because there were no traditional paintings. But the show had a certain 70s elan, such as works by Dwayne Michaels, a sweet photograph and letter from father to son, and Gordon Matta Clark's blueprint for cutting the Georgia Museum into parts with a chainsaw. Levine's Watergate fashions were clever fun. Roger Welch's interview with Jimmy's uncle Alton and his 3D map of plains had its own sociological relevance. And the purpose of the show, clearly stated in its title, Open to New Ideas, and I believe the show did precisely that. From my point of view, I think the whole students turned out, it was really a lot of fun. The artists seemed to have a good time coming south in the dead of winter. This went on in January. And they seemed to have a lot of fun mixing with locals. Banker Bucky Redwine was a playful raconteur at the artist's dinner at Charlie Williams' Pinecrest Lodge, if you all remember that place. He gifted Les Levine with a live possum, which was later released. It was in the spirit of things. Gordon Matta Clark received a 6-pack of Pabst Blue Ribbon autographed by Jimmy's brother, Billy. Jerry Jones got $1,000 in Confederate bills. Which would probably be worth more than that today. And it was truly a lighthearted exchange. They had a bluegrass band, and it was a kind of a fascinating mix of imported and local culture. The university and the museum also got gobs of press attention. The Athens Banner-Herald astutely observed that this art is interested and involved in what's going on in the world today. Obviously, contemporary art. Many pieces are narratives and diaries and documentation of current experiences and events. The Athens Observer writer Sally Adair noted the reactions of the show were a mix of hostility, delight, perplexity, and apathy. That's one reaction. But she said a surprising number of people were positive. The Atlanta Constitution's art critic, Smiley Burnett, hedged by calling the work challenging, unconventional, and really well done. The Village Voice in the artist's hometown quipped of the show, "Remember what happened last time Northerners marched on Georgia?" The New York Times called the work of these conceptually oriented artists far out art. The collection also garnered, in both Art News and Art in America, 3-page articles, long pieces about the collection and about the event itself. In short, Georgia and Athens and the museum were in the national spotlight for art, likely for the first time. My documentary was eventually shown on public television around the state, and the exhibition catalog was both published and available in the museum's gift shop. The last time I think this collection was shown was in 2007, which would have been its 30th anniversary. And I was asked to talk about it at that time. I'm amazed I'm still here 17 years later to do it again. My connection to the museum really tapered off after the Bill Hall era, and I got involved in other things. In 2015, I got entranced with, some people call them GIFs, some people call them GIFs, those 4-second videos that artists were creating in those years. So I proposed an exhibit of GIFs to the young museum curator at that time, Lynn Bull, who's since gone on to direct the museum out in Colorado. And Lynn liked the idea and got it approved, and we collaborated to curate a small selection of art GIFs essentially from around the world. They had one from France, one from Central America somewhere, and England, and the U.S. And again, they were, each one, it took a lot of effort to make them work technologically, but we did pull it off, and I was very happy with that. One other observation I'd like to make as I conclude is that involves the late Donald Keyes, who was a museum creator, American painting for 17 years. Keyes curated a series of exhibitions of Georgia artists, strictly Georgia artists, and I was always impressed by the high quality work of artists he found around the state. He did go visit a lot of people in their studios and invited them to be in this show. When he had the openings, a lot of these artists came to campus, so there was an opportunity to interact with them and for students to be involved as well. So you could sort of see their work and talk to them about their work. After Keyes retired in 2001, he founded a nonprofit gallery, Athens Institute for Contemporary Art, which is locally known as Athica, which continues today, 22 years later. Athica is totally independent, run by an all-volunteer board with no paid staff. It's supported by a local foundation and a variety of grants. And I think Athica fulfills Donald's vision for showing current art, hosting performance art, avant-garde music, artists in residence, workshops and forums and so forth. Athica is a beehive of artistic activity with few constraints. And it's a fine legacy for one of the museum's longtime staff members. Thank you.
dark. You in the house.
The spotlight was on you.
We welcome to each podium Dr. Paige Carmichael. This one first, please. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm actually a relative newcomer in the bunch, but it wasn't until I started putting this talk together that I recognized that I've been involved with the museum for 20 years. So I have enjoyed my service to the Georgia Museum of Art, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my service to the Friends, as well as some of the things I just enjoyed doing here at the Georgia Museum of Art, and how it snapped me up, dragged me in, and hasn't let me go in 20 years. I actually joined the board of the Friends in 2006, but I was involved volunteer-wise a little bit before that. I joined the executive committee, served first as secretary, and then president-elect for like 30 seconds, and then the president had a job someplace else, and so I stepped in as president. So it was a little bit of fire by trial, but because of the amazing museum staff and the amazing Bill Island and all the other people on the committee, they made that year very, very pleasant for me. This is the reason I even joined the Friends. This woman, I don't know if any of you know her, this is Dr. Christine Albright. She's a professor in the classics. She and I served as members of the board on the Athens Area Humane Society in around 2002-2003, and she suggested that I come and help volunteer with her on something that a friend of hers was doing. I said, I'm not an artist. I don't know anything about art. And she told me, you don't have to be an artist, you just have to love art. And I love art, so I joined. And I did a lot of, so what you're getting here is basically me pulling out pictures I have in my files. Some of these may actually belong to other people. These are just what was on my laptop. And I'm telling you about them, okay? So I spent a lot of my time trying to get other people to join the Friends. And shortly after I joined, the museum started undergoing renovation. I think it was around that time. And this is actually us at the Linden House trying to solicit new members. This is what was probably the first volunteer activity I ever did. You might have seen this picture on the reel that was going through. This is Sandy Turner, and she was involved in this initiative called Young at Art, and they put on different programs, and one of them was a Black History Month event, and in this program, they tried to involve younger people in the museum. At that point, I was younger people. Okay. And this is our Young at Art. Christy, Sandy, and I made all those cutouts in the old museum. I don't think we've started renovating it yet. And I actually invited my parents. That's my dad and my mom. And so they're right, I don't know how many of you remember the old museum. There's a big staircase that came right down the middle. That's them standing at the base of that staircase. And that's my sister over there. You'll be hearing a whole lot about her. She is 10 years younger than I am, born almost exactly 10 years to the date younger than I am. And we are more like twins than we are 10 years apart. And whatever I do, she gets to do as well, and the Georgia Museum of Art was no exception. So this is right after the museum started to undergo renovation. And
we were homeless. We didn't have any place that we could have the events we normally have. And along with Sandy and some others, we decided that we were going to put on a small version of the Black History Month event. But we wanted to have not just lectures, we really wanted to bring all kinds of art together. We wanted music, we wanted dance, we wanted fashion, we wanted every aspect of art to be in these celebrations. And so we this was in 2010, and this was held over at the Lamar Dodd School of Art, and I think 40 people came to this event. With unbridled nepotism, I solicited my husband, John Ahi, to be one of the artists who showed their work, as well as two really good friends of mine, Yvonne Studevan and Harold Rittenberry. And they all came. We had a little mini exhibit, had dinner, and then we honored Mrs. Lou Castanel, a long-term member of the Friends, and her husband, Mrs. May Castanel, her husband, Lou Castanel, who was the first African-American dean at any school at the University of Georgia. We honored them. And then afterwards, we had a concert that was during which the choir from Ebenezer Baptist Church West performed. I would say that at that time I was also a member of the Athens chapter of the Links Incorporated, and myself and May went to that board and asked if they would consider sponsoring the Black History Month event, or mini Black History Month event, and they said yes to a tune of $500. And from that moment on, the Athens chapter of the Links Incorporated, a group of African American women, professional women, who give themselves in service, have been constantly associated with the Black History Month event and the museum itself, especially in leadership roles. So this is Lou and May St. Louis accepting the award that we gave in his parents at that event. And this is the Ebenezer Baptist Church West performing. And I think I can get, do you guys think I look like I'm singing in this picture? I tell people I am. I'm just introducing them. I am not singing here. So for a while we were still homeless, and a group of us started trying to find ideas how to keep the community of the museum together, even though we did not have a building to have that community in. And we did that by doing these events called the Art Of, so the art of music and the art of singing. This is actually our Rosenbaum studio. He brought a bunch of young men together, showed his art, and then sang his sea ditties?
Shanties.
Sea shanties, sea shanties, yes, those. And it was freezing that night. My husband's wearing a sweater and a coat, and I'm not sure where I'm going there, but I found that picture, and it was obviously the same night, so I'm showing. This is another fun thing we did. We did a speakeasy at C.L. Morehead, so generous. He allowed us into his house, and we put together a Gatsby-themed party with gambling in the basement and everything. Oops, am I supposed to say that? But yeah, we all got dressed up and had a lot of fun. And this young man you'll be seeing a whole lot more of because he's played such an important role in this museum. And that's Todd Emily. So, once again, we got a home. This is a new museum. It was beautiful. A labor of love that I was tangentially involved in seeing how it developed and how passionate Bill Island was about making sure that it was not an all red brick building. It's absolutely beautiful, right down to the sculpture garden. And then I started being involved in hosting even more events around Black History Month. And as many of you know, these became bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is just a couple of them. This is I think this is 2012. This is one of the smaller ones, but it was one of the first ones we had in this facility. And this Black History Month event featured the amazing Kashana Armstrong. We had sort of this blues, I think it was called, the museum presents the Blues Cafe, so we had Billie Holiday themed decorations. It was so beautiful. And again, Todd Emily was one of the people who sponsored this, and that is Kashana. We started off very early wanting to use the Black History Month event to find some way to celebrate African Americans in our community, people from Athens. And here we are. Here's Harold Rittenberry, Michael Thurmond. Michael is from Athens, Clark County, grew up here, and we honored him with one of the awards that the Athens chapter of the Links Incorporated put together, the Lillian Lynch Award, which was given in recognition of one of their very, very fine members that passed away suddenly. And here I'm presenting then Commissioner Thurmond with his award. And that's Yvonne Stedovan. She is still one of the members of the Athens chapter of the Links Incorporated, also holding up with Bill Island the award that night. And another great thing that happened was us meeting the Thompsons. They have done so much for Black art in this museum. It's absolutely incredible. This is another one of our Black History Month events in which we honor the Thompsons for what they had done. Both Brenda and Larry, even though Brenda is really the collector, Larry said he just supports her habit, and have been integral in not only bringing pieces of art that we may not have ever seen to this museum, but in addition to that, they've also brought people, artists, to Athens that probably wouldn't have come here. And of course, everybody knows about the gallery in their name, and Shania, who is the curator that they have sponsored. We subsequently named another award, the award we normally gave people who were local Athenians. We subsequently named that in honor of Larry and Brenda Thompson, and the Thompson Award is that we give every year. We've also had a lot of other people. This is Monica, she was Kaufman, now Pearson, another Black History Month event. Here we have our poet laureate. This is Natasha Trethewey, receiving the Lillian Lynch Award, and on many occasions our president joins us for those. We also had discounts for the Black History Month event so that we could encourage young people to come and see art, especially young people of color who thought that they may not have been interested in art at a museum. You know, a museum sounds like really highfalutin to them, and they come in and see all the beautiful art and recognize and realize that it's actually quite accessible. The other thing that I was involved with was a celebration called Elegant Salute. This is actually 2008. We are on a tractor, and I do not remember what the theme was, but obviously it was something to do with hard hats and tractors. Does anybody?
A hard hat salute.
It was called the hard hat salute? Oh, because of the, yeah, that's right, because of the construction, that's right. Okay, so if you do not know, Elegant Salute was actually the brainchild of Mrs. M. Smith Griffith. The auditorium is named after her. And this is quite a lavish affair, and I do like dressing up and going to galas. The other thing that started quite recently, due to the brainchild of the museum's staff as well as Ari Hung, and that was the after party. And I was involved with the after party many years, and as you can see, it's not quite the same staid and sedate event that the gala is. To this day, the after party is still one of my favorite parts of Elegant Salute. I also got to be the co-chair of Elegant Salute one year. And I got to co-chair with Betsy Dormany, and ever so biased, but I think that was one of the best years ever. The other thing that I really enjoy doing, and I got to do this about 3 or 4 times in the museum, and that is not just enjoy the music, but actually bring the music. I may not be an artist in that I don't do visual art, but I do play the guitar, and I do it very carefully. In that very first Young at Art thing that I did with Sandy and Kirsty, Faith and Paige Carmichael. Faith is my 10-year apart twin. She and I actually performed at that first one so many years ago. Now, she is the real artist. She is the jazz musician. I can play the guitar and carry a tune. But still, it was absolutely wonderful to be able to do that here with my baby sister. Faith has then gone on to perform several times in the museum. 4 times at my count, 5 if you count the time that she performed at the Speakeasy we had at Seal Moorhead. She has a jazz trio. She is amazingly talented, even if I say so myself. The other great thing that I got to be involved with this museum is I got to actually meet some of my heroes, meet artists that I would not have otherwise met. And one of them, of course, is David Driscoll. Here we are all over at Bill's house after he had a major opening here. I got to sit down, talk to the man, get to know him a little bit. It was wonderful. I do not have a picture of me with this gentleman, but Willie Cole came in 2004, right about the time we joined, to do an artist's residency here. We met because Bill took a bunch of us out to dinner, and we've stayed in touch, and whenever we're in New Jersey, he lives in Montclair, we've become very good friends. So, that's my little jaunt down memory lane, and I just want to say that it's been a wonderful 20 years, and I'm looking forward to another 20, and to all those red ladies, thanks for the memories.
Thank you for bearing with me. I'm not always technologically savvy, but we're navigating today. We welcome Jean Petrovs to the stage, or to the podium. And Jean has been a long-time docent here at the museum, and so she will share her experience with you.
Hello, everybody. Of long-standing, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Yes, I've put in 28 years this month. And so people do ask, what is a docent? What does a docent do? Why did you become a docent? So I don't want to lecture them, but if they don't already know, I mentioned that we are like tour guides. We are from the Latin term docere, to lead, and so we're happy to show you what is upstairs and have you take tours. So I wanted to tell you how this all started for me. As you can tell, I'm not from around here. I was born in Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, and raised 50 miles up the Allegheny River in a little town called Fort City, where Pittsburgh Plate Glass was founded. And when I was in 8th grade, our Latin teacher decided that we would go see the movie Ben-Hur in Pittsburgh. We had the school bus for the day, and we were going to get to also go out to lunch, which we look forward to that. And then she mentioned that we're going to take a tour of the Carnegie Museum of Art in Pittsburgh. And that was my first time to go there. We had a docent. She was lovely. She was a retired teacher. And I was so impressed with what she did because she made the art come to life for me and for the rest of my friends. It made sense when we walked past something that was nonsensical at first. And so I came home and my parents said, "Did you have a nice day?" Of course, we'd seen the wonderful movie Ben-Hur. And I said, "Well, when I grow up and I get old, I'm going to become a docent." Because I figured she was retired and so she had to be ancient, and she was still moving around pretty well, so maybe 60, but that seemed old to me. So after having taught, I had students with learning disabilities and behavior disorders in high schools in Ohio, and had started out right from college being a librarian, assistant librarian in the children's department. I also was on the bookmobile, and so I got to do those things that I had trained for. But eventually, we moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan, as was already mentioned tonight, or this afternoon. And I read in the paper one day that they were advertising for docents, and I knew what a docent was. So I decided that I would go in and take whatever it was, the course, given by the wonderful Bobby Levine, who was there for a number of years and really treated it almost as though it were a master's course. It was wonderful. And so we took coursework for a couple of years while touring, having a big sister or big brother to follow, had a wonderful time. And we were there for 5 years. And one day my husband came home and said, "Well, you know how I'm going to Athens a number of times? I'm on the road anyway for his job in industry." And he said, "I've been asked to help run a business in Athens. So we're going to move." And I said, "Oh no, I had a perfect life in Ann Arbor. I was a football fan. I must admit I was a Wolverine. We used to go to home games. We went to the after season games and had a great time." And what was going to happen when I got to Athens? He said, "Well, you lived in the South because we lived for 5 years in North Carolina. You like the South?" "Yes." "And you like college towns. You've been in a big one here in Ann Arbor." "Well, Athens is a college town. Has a big university, Georgia, University of Georgia." So as a good sport, I came here, and we came house hunting on Mother's Day weekend of 1995. And he had said that they had an art museum, and I said, okay. So we went to the art museum, which was on North Campus. When you talk about the old museum, it's where the president's offices are now. And before we were to fly home, we took a quick trip through. And I must say, I wasn't particularly enthused by having come from a large museum, and it was this. But he said, "Don't worry, they're going to build a beautiful new building." I've heard that before. But he was right. And so the beautiful new building was constructed. But before we could get over here, I was also touring. I walked in one day to the little museum in North Campus, and Trudy Snyder, if any of you remember Trudy, was at the desk, and I said, "I've been trained as a docent." And she said, "When can you start?" And I said, "Right away. My little boy's in school, I have time, and so when do you need me?" She said, "Right away." So my first tour was for Rutland Academy. I think it was was about 20 young people who came with a policeman, who was armed, by the way, and 5 teachers. They came in, and it was a Beverly Buchanan exhibit. So there were a number of, if you know Beverly's work, she did a lot of things with tobacco sheds and beautiful constructions. They were in vitrines. And I noticed that these young people who were very polite and very respectful and asked good questions and were willing to talk. But I noticed that I was losing some of them. They were disappearing, and I thought, what has happened? Where did they go? And it turned out that a couple of the teachers were concerned because these were big young people, and we didn't have a whole lot of room there. So as they moved around, they were afraid they might bump into something. And so they thought, thoughtfully removing people from my tour. And we straightened it all out. I got a chance to say goodbye. And then eventually, as you know, we had our beautiful museum here to come and have a wonderful time. So most of the work that we do is with children, although we also have drop-in tours for adults on Wednesday afternoons and on Sunday afternoons. And so you can just come by and we'll take you around to see everything. For the children, I don't know if you know, the school board at the Stark County Schools has mandated for the 5th grades all across the county to come to the museum once a school year. So there are 15 of those classes. Some of them, when they come, are between 90 and 100 children. They start out in here, so we can kind of get an idea of whether they're coming in really interested in going upstairs and how do the teachers manage them. They find out what is expected of them and whether or not they can talk, because a lot of them think they have to be quiet, but we want them to talk. We try to do activities with them to find out what they think about what they're seeing. And so we go upstairs, we have them divided into sections with docents, and we have a route so that we don't bump into each other, and we take them around so they get to see things. And eventually they'll have an art experience down in the art studio so that they can make something to take home or to leave with us, because we now have a display area across from the art studio that we have for them to use. And so we have a wonderful time with them. And people ask, well, do they know how to behave? Yes, they do, because they're told, you represent our school, we want you to come in and be interested in what you're seeing. And honestly, over 28 years, there have been very few times where I've thrown up my hands and thought, what have I got here? What's going on? Because usually they are very interested. I have a couple of things to mention to you about that. It's lovely to have them come. I sit on the floor with them. I figured the time will come when I won't get up from the floor, but I might as well do it while I can. I've even said to them a couple of times, you'll help me get up from the floor. Well, oh, yes, ma'am, we'll help you get up. And so we have activities where they actually have to think about what they're seeing. We have a frame that they can hold up to themselves. They can pose like the portraits in the portrait gallery. We have portrait interviews where they think up questions that they can ask the sitter of this portrait, maybe far back in time, hundreds of years ago. We have them see other art pieces where they have to decide what's happening in that scene. Many of them are stories, and children love stories. So they usually take part. We go around the group, try to get everybody to participate, and they almost always do, and take it seriously as well. When we're in the landscape area, we'll ask them what landscape they'd like to walk into. And if they did so, well, they have to tell us why. We might even have a card, depending on time, that has a star on it, and they'll put that card underneath on the floor of the painting that they like best, that they'd like to walk into. They'll tell us what would you hear if you were in there, what would it smell like, what season is it, what time of the day. Try to personalize what they're looking at. And it's amazing how they are really very inventive, and it's always a pleasure to see smiling faces when they're sitting there. I had the pleasure of walking down the stairs one day with a little fellow who was not in my group, but was on the same staircase. And as we got to the bottom of the floor, we were going to go to the art studio, he looked up at me, the most beautiful expression on his face, and he said, "This has been the best day of my life." That's usually the reaction I get. And at first I thought, oh my gosh, is he just saying this? Is this for real? And he was genuine. And I wish I had said, why do you say that? Maybe it's better that I didn't ask him, because I'm hoping that the reason he liked it was so different from sitting in school. And that he was seeing things that were shiny and were historic and were off the beaten path. He was out of the box, and so he was having fun with that. One day, walking up the stairs with an 8th grade group, there was a young lady leading the group. She must have been the mother of the group. And got to the top of the stairs, turned to the right, we're going to the permanent collection, and without any prompting from me or anyone else, she said, "Oh, look." And I thought, could we borrow her? Because we could have her start that every time we got a tour. This is wonderful. I didn't have to do anything. Tours sometimes can go a little haywire because you can get off message. You can have somebody say, well, my aunt is an artist and she could have done that. Why don't you have her pictured on the wall? So we also had some people who said when they were in the press gallery where we have the paintings, which often, and of course you can see right now, are religious. And we've had children say, oh, now that's the real art. So something telling them that that's something that isn't just expressive art and it's not just a picture of a landscape. It's something that was meaningful in a spiritual way. We also had a wonderful docent here, Charles Pinckney, who's a jeweler in town, who designed, as a matter of fact, the logo for the Georgia Museum of Art. And he had to then leave the docent group because his business of making jewelry got bigger. And he was learning from me on the tour. We had a group of adults who were very retarded. They were ambulatory, but I couldn't really understand what I should be doing with them. I wasn't getting anywhere. I'm supposed to be the expert, and he's learning from me. Well, we're in the landscape area, and all of a sudden, I hear from him, who likes to go fishing? And amazingly, we started getting them to talk, and they talked about they love to be near the water, they like to hold a fishing pole, they like to eat fish, they like to catch fish. It was something that was so beautifully done, and I thank him every time I see him. And he was here not that long ago because he had an exhibit. We have a wonderful time with the guests that come here, and there's always a story that I can tell when I get home. I can tell the other docents as well. And sometimes the stories are better than others. Sometimes we have a little trouble. We have to learn how to cope with the situation. And when we had COVID and everything was stopped and then we came back together, we even had teachers say to us, now remember, they're 5th graders, but they're acting like they have just finished 2nd grade because they missed so much school. So you're hearing this before you start doing anything, and you think, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? But I have to say that everything has gone well. And over time, it has really been an enrichment for all of us. I want to end by telling you a story of when I had a high school reunion back in Pennsylvania. We were flying home from Pittsburgh, and so we stopped to see my relatives. And they live in the area where University of Pittsburgh is, and Pitt Learning Center, Learning Tower, and also the Carnegie Museum of Art. And so my cousin said, let's go over and take a look. And I had not been there since I was in 8th grade. And of all things, we get there just when, at 2 o'clock, and they didn't even know it was going to happen, there's a gentleman standing there welcoming us, very suave, in a smoking jacket, tall, distinguished, and handsome. And he said, I'm here today to be your guide. I'm going to be your docent. My wife wasn't feeling well, so I said I would substitute for her. He asked us where we were all from, and when he got to me and my husband, we said, Athens, Georgia. Athens, Georgia, he said. I used to live there. I was at the Navy school. I was a Navy doctor. And I was at the Navy Supply Corps school. How is Athens? And I thought to myself, isn't this interesting that all those many years ago, it was being at the Carnegie Museum of Art in Pittsburgh and seeing that docent, and then going full circle and wanting to travel to other museums as we do when we're on the road for the football team. By the way, if you think I'm still a Wolverine, you're wrong, as you can tell. And so, yes, this has been a labor of love, you could say, and we enjoy it so much, and I'm glad to see all of you out here.
I forgot to mention that Jean was the 2020 Volunteer of the Year. And she received the, Smitty Award?
Yes.
We welcome to the stage, or excuse me, to the podium, Lee Epting.
So how do you make this thing flip around? You gonna do it? She's gonna do it for me. All right. Well, I wore my Archie shirt. I got two fancy shirts. I wore a fancy Archie one today. I figured photograph better. All right. I'm not quite as old as Mr. Old man. He started before I did, but we've both been dealing with this thing for over 50 years. I did know Mr. Holbrook, and I came on in the early 70s. I just built a station complex down at TK Hardy's. No, I did not murder TK Hardy. But I just built that, and Smitty Griffith's husband, Louis, would hang around in it. He loved it, he supported us and all that. So I met him, and he had been to a couple of events that we had, and he said they're fixing to do something up at the museum. Bill Paul is here, and he's going to have the Sloan exhibit, John Sloan exhibit. And would you help out? I said, well, I'm game for anything. Now, what I did, all these people have worked hard, they've done academic things, they've worked with you. I just give parties. That's all I do is just give parties. And other people pay for them. So I said I'd love to, and we came. Where is our, that's Miss Sloan, I think that's Miss Sloan, and Mr. Holbrook at that party. But can we flick it and see if we can see the piano? Anyway, you get to it. All right, you take care of that. Anyway, we had a player piano down at the, that's all right, that's the party. And you see that lady right over there? I'll tell a story about her. That is Miss Cobb. Anybody remember Miss Cobb? She was the caterer for the state of Georgia, Athens for sure. I tried to go to work for her about this time when I started the station. She said she'd already raised all the two boys. She didn't want to raise any more. I told her the difference between those two boys and me, I planned to work for them. Anyway, she didn't allow me to work for her. But this is the one time that I got to work with her in all the years. And that was for the Sloan party. She was catering upstairs, and she was going to do the dinner. I was going to do the cocktail party downstairs, and we went down to TK Hardy's Saloon. Somewhere you can flip through there and find that. All right. Well, that's all right. That's the party. Now, we've come a long way. Look at the folding chairs. Look at the length of the tablecloth. And that was probably $25 a head for that one. Right there. So we've come a long way from those days. You can just keep on flicking. I'll just tell stories about those things. Anyway, we were able to cater it together. Now there, I go down to TK Hardy's, and I sit downstairs, we'll run to play a piano. Now, the player piano had drums and cymbals. You flick it one, that's the guys getting into the basement of the old museum. And flick it one more, and you'll see it at the, oh, there you go, there. It's got drums, it's got cymbals, it's got piano. You put a nickel in, and it just raises king, da, 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 and you know, everything. So we had it down there. Now, back then, labor was cheap, you know, it was free. And we hauled it in there. So that was the first party with a theme that we did. All right, keep on going with these things. We did these about 15 minutes before this thing started. There is Lamar Dodd. Now look at that dress. Now, we dressed in costume. That wasn't costume. That was supposed to be the real thing. But that was at the party, and up there on the top left, all we had was 2 white tables. Every party we did over the old museum was on these white 4-legged tables. They all looked alike, and they were all pretty boring there for a while. But then about you can keep on going, about 1980, okay, there's the melon. When Smitty got involved, things changed. And it came about the time Richard Snyderman came in as director. Now Richard brought a new concept of giving parties, giving events. He kind of joined with Smitty, and it went up 5 notches. All of a sudden, things were going to be done. The tablecloths were going to go to the ground. The chairs were not going to be folded. You go in to plan a party with Smitty, and you sit down, and she would say, well, Lee, now, very sweet, very nice. Hair didn't move too much. She would say, now, Lee, what are we going to have? The theme is French this time. What are we going to have? And then before I got anything out of my mouth, she said, well, I thought we might have so-and-so and creme brulee for dessert and all this. And all I did was say, yes, ma'am, because she already had it all planned. She knew exactly what it was going to look like, what we were going to do, and how we were going to do it. So she was a great inspiration to me. I look at the man with the pipe in his hand. Lord mercy. All right, let's go ahead and see what else. So that's when we start. Isn't that sweet? I did have hair, I promise you. And Bobby had long hair enough to put up all the way up at the top. So they found that. I didn't put that in. That's Hope putting that in. Okay, you go ahead. From there. So we started doing the elegant salutes. And what we did is when we moved up over here, we went to tents. We didn't have a place to do them. And so we went to tents in the parking lot. So it was a major production. It was not easy then. It cost a lot of money and a lot of time, took a lot of volunteers and to make it happen. But all the way out in the parking lot, and you can show some more in there that went to the warehouse, and you see, it got a little bit fancy as it went on. Now, we're not up to the Chevrolet chairs yet. We're still on folding chairs, but they're white and they're not metal. So we came up with many themes, and let me see, I have a few notes. I'm going to back up just a minute and tell about one of the parties we did at the old museum. It was the Davis Common party, and Davis did portraits, pictures of theaters, and always had a car in it of some sort. So this is where we started putting fun ideas out. I went to every place in town that I found, every car shop, and got all of the hubcaps that I could find. Now the problem is you have to get them clean enough to serve food out. But the whole thing is done with hubcaps and films, and because he theaters, so we had film and projectors, and the tables and things started being fun and different and interesting. So that was one of the first ones we did. Another one we did for Mardot. I don't know if it was his birthday or when he was retired. But it was at the old museum. It's a black tie event. And everybody came in. Ladies were all dressed up. Everything was fine. And all of a sudden, I look around. And that was back in the 70s when we had hippies. And I look around and hit two hippie art students. And everybody's black tie. And they're dressed up with, shorts and blue jeans. And they're going around there eating. They're just making themselves at home. And so I go up and I said, folks, can I see y'all in the back just a minute? I take them back to the kitchen and I said, I tell you what, I'm all for crashing a party. That doesn't bother me to crash a party. But if you're going to do it, you need to do it in style. And you're not quite up to par for this party, so would you mind stepping out? And so I took them out the back door. Well, about 15 minutes I look around, and there they are again. They're back in there. She has gone and put her hair all up in a bouffant. She's put one of the tablecloths around her shoulders. And we used to use those little frilly toothpicks with all colors of frills on them. They were sticking all out of her hair. I went up and said, young lady, that's all I ask is that you have a little style. And they got to stay there, so that was fine. But that there's always something interesting going to happen. At the balls, I remember the year that it was Lucy Allen, and it was tagging, and we were going to do Ossobuco. Well, I get over here, and I'm going to be here 3 or 4 hours before the party, and I always taste everything. It's obvious that I always taste everything. So I go to the Ossobuco, and somehow the cook had decided that Lee likes rare meat. He doesn't like meat overdone. Well, you don't do ossobuco, right, rare, because you can't cut it. And I'm looking, my God, I'm fixing to serve 200 people in a couple of hours. We have to haul it back to the shop, put it into the pressure cooker, cook the hell out of it, and get it back over here in time, because Lucy's going to kill it. Sure enough, that comes out that way. So we have always had all kind of interesting things happen. But they all make a memory, and that's what life's all about anyways, the memory of the whole thing. I'm going to tell you 1, 2 more, and then that'll be good. Oh, the Interim Symposium. I want to give credit. That's been one of the greatest things that the museum has done that I've been involved with. Dale Couch, when we got that board going, we live in that era of those wonderful antiques. That's not just fine, some of those, but of that era, and I just love it. And I have to give credit to the hard work that group has done to put that collection together and to have those symposiums every year and bring them every other year and bring them to the museum. So I hope y'all all participate in that. Let's see, anything else? We got to get out of y'all's way so we can go away. Yes, one more thing. There is a picture of, I don't know if there's one of Mr. Holbrook over at the Taylor Grady House, but I'm going to put a plug in for it, especially for this Historic Athens group. We just were able to get the city to okay the foundation, Taylor Grady Foundation, to save that house and put it together. And it will open, if it passes next Tuesday night, the city council, then it will open again as a venue for Athens and will be safe for all of us. So we're really excited about that. There are many pictures we found in here of the parties that were held over there before we had a museum. So basically, it's been a fun ride. I hope we have many more, and thanks for letting me be a part of it.
we'd like to take this time to allow our Executive Director, Tommy Valentine, to come. And
So, one of the folks' favorite things to do is to quietly put me on the spot, so I didn't know that I'd be speaking, but it'll be very easy. This is one of the most wonderful places in Athens. I've had the privilege of going to the museum since it, as a boy in its original location. I now have the privilege of being able to take my daughters here. It was wonderful as we were coming out of peak COVID to be able to find this as a safe haven, as a careful place. And this is clearly a place that is stewarded by people who love the arts and who love Athens in equal measure. We want to really say thank you to all the panelists. We want to say thank you to Hillary with the museum. Can we hear from Hillary? One of the most wonderful things about this place is, and all of the people in this room know this, is that I think that, to going back to the comment earlier about how a museum can seem like an intimidating place, to come to realize that a lot of the people behind the scenes here are every bit as cool and as glamorous and as have as much county cred as any of the people that run any of the music venues in Athens or any of the other places that we love calling home. So one last note, and this is a bit awkward because I'm acknowledging a member of our team, but I would like to do just a short round of applause for Hope Iglehart. Hope showed great perseverance and dedication in preparing this. She's put countless hours in not only finding the right group of panelists, which clearly, as you all heard from the remarks, we found, but also preparing the remarks and making sure that today would be ready for you. So thank you so much. Please continue to support this historic and incredible institution. We're glad to be here with you. Thank you, and have a great afternoon. Great evening. Thank you.